Today's topic is strategizing, structuring, and learning around the world. Let's talk about that. How can multinational enterprises, such as McDonald's, strategically manage growth around the world so that they can be successful both locally and internationally? How can they learn country tastes and global trends? How can they improve the odds for better innovation? These are some of the key questions that will be addressed in this chapter, which focuses on relatively large M&Es. We start by discussing the crucial relationship between four strategies and four structures. Next, we consider how the institution based and resource based views shed light on these issues. Let us talk about multinational strategies and structures. It introduces an integration responsiveness framework centered on the pressures for cost reductions and local responsiveness. We then outline the four strategic choices and the four corresponding organizational structures that MNEs typically adopt. The first strategy is pressures for cost reduction and local responsiveness. MNEs confront primarily two sets of pressures, cost reduction and local responsiveness. These two sets of pressures are captured in the integration responsiveness framework, which allows managers to deal with the pressures for both global integration and local responsiveness. Cost pressures often call for global integration, while local responsiveness pushes MNEs to adapt locally in both domestic and international competition. Pressures to reduce costs are universal. What is unique in international competition is the pressures for local responsiveness, which means reacting to different consumer preferences and host country demands. Host country demands and expectations add to the pressures for local responsiveness. In Europe, Canadian firm Bombardier manufactures an Austrian version of rail cars in Austria, a Belgian version in Belgium, and other versions in other countries. Taken together, being locally responsive certainly makes local customers and governments happy, but unfortunately increases the cost. Given the universal interest in lowering costs, one natural tendency is to downplay or ignore the different needs and wants of various local markets and instead market a global version of the products and services. The movement to globalize offering can be traced back to an article by Theodore Levitt, which was published in 1983, The Globalization of Markets. Levitt argued that worldwide consumer tastes are converging. As evidence, Levitt pointed to the worldwide success of Coke Classic, Levi Strauss jeans, and Sony TV. Levitt predicted that such convergence would characterize most product markets in the future. The four strategic choices. Based on the integration responsiveness framework, the four strategic choices home replication, localization, global standardization, and transnational. Each strategy has its own sets of pros and cons. Let's talk about home replication strategy. It's often known as international strategy, duplicates home country based competencies in foreign countries. Such competencies include production scales, distribution efficiencies, and brand power. In manufacturing, this is usually manifested in an export strategy. In services, this is often done through licensing and franchising. This strategy is relatively easy to implement and usually the first one adopted when firms venture abroad. On the disadvantage side, home replication strategy often lacks local responsiveness because it focuses on the home country. This strategy makes sense when the majority of the firm's customers are domestics. However, when a firm aspires to broaden its international scope, failing to be mindful of foreign customers' needs and wants may alienate them. Second, localization strategy. It is an extension of the home replication strategy. Localization, which means multi-domestic strategy, focuses on a number of foreign countries and regions, each of which is regarded as a standalone local market worthy of significant attention and adaptation. While sacrificing global efficiencies, this strategy is effective when differences among national and regional markets are clear and pressures for cost reduction are low. For example, Disney has attempted to localize some of its offering in its five theme parks in Anaheim, California, Orlando, Florida, and Hong Kong, Paris, and Tokyo. Its newest park in Shanghai will feature traditional Disney rides and those based on Chinese culture. In terms of disadvantages, the localization strategy has high costs due to duplication of efforts in multiple countries. The cost of producing a variety of programming for MTV are obviously greater than the cost of producing one set of programming. As a result, this strategy is only appropriate in industries where the pressures for cost reduction are not significant. Another potential drawback is too much local autonomy, which happens when each subsidiary regards its country as so unique that it is difficult to introduce corporate wide changes. As the opposite of localization strategy, global standardization strategy is sometimes referred to simply as global strategy. Its hallmark is the development and distribution of standardized products worldwide in order to reap the maximum benefits from low cost advantages. While both the home replication strategy and the global standardization strategy minimizes local responsiveness, one crucial difference is that M&E pursuing a global standardization strategy is not limited to its major operations at home. In a number of countries, the M&E may designate centers of excellence, defined as subsidiaries, explicitly recognized as a source of important capabilities, with the intention that capabilities be leveraged by and or disseminated to other subsidiaries. In terms of the disadvantages, a global standardization strategy obviously sacrifices local responsiveness. This strategy makes great sense in industries where pressures for low cost reductions are paramount and pressures for local responsiveness are relatively minor. However, as noted earlier, in industries ranging from automobiles to consumer products, a one size fits all strategy may be inappropriate. Consequently, arguments such as all industries are becoming global and all firms need to pursue a global standardization strategy are potentially misleading. Transnational strategy aims to capture the best of both worlds by endeavoring to the both cost efficient and local responsiveness. In addition to cost efficiency and local responsiveness, a third hallmark of this strategy is global learning and diffusion of innovations. Traditionally, the diffusion of innovations in MNEs is a one-way flow from the home country to various host countries. The label home replication says it all. Underpinning the traditional one-way flow is the assumption that the home country is the best location for generating innovations. MNEs that engage in a transnational strategy promote global learning and diffusion of innovations in multiple ways. Innovations not only flow from the home country to the host countries, but also flow from the host countries to the home country. On the disadvantage side, a transnational strategy is organizationally complex and difficult to implement. The large amount of knowledge sharing and coordination may slow down decision making. Trying to achieve cost efficiencies, local responsiveness, and global learning simultaneously places contradictory demand on MNEs. For organizational structures, international divisions is typically used when the firms initially expand abroad, often engaging in a home replication strategy. Foreign subsidiary managers whose input is channeled through their international divisions are not given sufficient voice to relative to the heads of domestic divisions. Second, by the design, the international division serves as a silo whose activities are not coordinated with the rest of the firm, which focuses on domestic activities. Consequently, many firms phase out of their structure after the initial stage of overseas expansion. Geographical area structure organizes the M&E according to different geographic areas. It is appropriate for a localization strategy. A geographic area can be a country or a region led by a country manager. Each area is largely standalone in contrast to the limited voice of subsidiary managers. In the international division structure, country managers carry a great deal of weight in the geographic region. Interestingly and paradoxically, both the strengths and weaknesses of this structure lie in its local responsiveness. While being locally responsive can be a virtue, it also encourages the fragmentation of the M&E global product division structure, which is the opposite of the geographic area structure. Suppose the global standardization strategy by assigning global responsibilities to each product division. For example, Unilever reduced the number of soap producing factories in Europe from 10 to 2 after adopting this structure. Recently, because of the popularity of the global standardization structure, the global product division structure is on the rise. Its main drawback is that local responsiveness suffers, as Ford discovered when it phased out the geographic area structure. A global matrix elevates the disadvantages associated with both the geographic area and the global product division structures, especially for the MNEs adopting a transnational strategy. Despite its merits on the paper, the matrix structure may add layers of management, slow down the decision speed, and increase the cost while not showing significant performance improvement. There is no conclusive evidence for the superiority of the matrix structure. The reciprocal relationship between multinational strategy and structure. In one word, the relationship between the strategy and structure is reciprocal. Three ideas stand out. Strategy usually drives structure. The difference between structure and strategy, as exemplified by the pairs in each of the four cells, is crucial. A misfit, such as combining a global standardization strategy with a geographical area structure, may have grave consequences. The relationship is not one way. As much as strategy drives structure, structure also drives strategy. The withdrawal from the unworkable matrix such as MNEs, such as ABB, has called into the question the wisdom of the transnational strategy. Neither strategy nor structure is static. It is often necessary to change strategy, structure, or both in an effort to move toward a global standardization strategy. Many MNEs have adopted a global product division structure while de emphasizing the role of the country headquarters. A further experimentation is to have an emerging economies division, which is not dedicated to any single country but dedicated to pursuing opportunities in a series of emerging economies ranging from Brazil to Saudi Arabia. Cisco pioneered in this structure, which has been followed by rivals such as IBM. Let us talk about worldwide learning, innovation, and knowledge management. Knowledge management. Underpinning the recent emphasis on worldwide learning and innovation is the emerging interest in knowledge management. Knowledge management can be defined as the structure, process, and systems that actively develop, leverage, and transfer knowledge. Many readers regard knowledge management as simply information management. Taken to an extreme, such a perspective can result in a profoundly mistaken belief that the installation of sophisticated information technology infrastructure is the be all and end of all knowledge management. Knowledge management depends not only on IT but also on informal social relationship with the MNE. This is because there are two categories of knowledge: explicit knowledge and tactic knowledge. Explicit knowledge is codifiable, it can be written down and transferred with little loss of richness. Virtually, all of the knowledge captured, stored, and transmitted by IT is explicit. Tactic knowledge is non codifiable and its acquisition and transfer require hands on practice. For example, reading a driver's manual, a ton of explicit knowledge without any road practice does not make you a good driver. Tactic knowledge is evidently more important and harder to transfer and learn. Consequently, from a resource based view, explicit knowledge captured by IT may be strategically less important. What counts is the hard to codify and hard to transfer tactic knowledge. Knowledge management in four types of multinational enterprises. The differences in knowledge management among four types of MNEs fundamentally stem from the interdependence between the headquarters and subsidiaries among various subsidiaries. In the MNEs, pursuing a home replication strategy such as interdependence is moderate, and the role of subsidiaries is largely to adapt and leverage parent company competencies. Thus, knowledge on new products and technologies is mostly developed at the center and down to subsidiaries, representing the traditional one-way flow. When MNEs adopt a localization strategy, the interdependence is low. Knowledge management centers on developing insights that can best serve local markets. Ford of Europe used to develop cars for Europe with a limited flow of knowledge to and from the headquarters. In MNEs pursuing a global standardization strategy, on the other hand, the interdependence is increased. Knowledge is developed and retained at the headquarters and a few centers of excellence. Consequently, knowledge and people typically flow from headquarters to these centers and to the other subsidiaries. For example, Yokogawa, Hewlett Packard, HP subsidiary in Japan, won a coveted Japanese Deming Award for quality. A hallmark of traditional MNEs is a high degree of interdependence and extensive and bidirectional flows of knowledge. Kikkoman first developed teriyaki sauce specifically for the US market as a barbecue glaze. It was then marketed to Japan and to the rest of the world. Similarly, Haagen-Dazs developed a popular ice cream in Argentina based on a locally popular caramelized milk dessert. The company then took the new flavor and sold it as dulce de leche throughout the United States and Europe. Within 1 year, it became the second most popular ice cream, next only to vanilla. Instead of a top down hierarchy, the MNE thus can be conceptualized as an integrated work of subsidiaries. Each subsidiary not only develops locally relevant knowledge but also aspires to contribute knowledge to benefit the MNEs as a whole. Third is globalizing research and development (R&D). R&D represents a crucial arena for knowledge management. Relative to production and marketing, only one more recently has R&D emerged as an important function to be internationalized. Often known as innovation seeking investment, the intensification of competition for innovation drives the globalization of R&D. Such R&D provides a vehicle to access a foreign country's talent and expertise. From a resource-based standpoint, a fundamental basis for competitive advantage is innovation based from heterogeneity. Decentralized R&D performed by different locations and teams around the world virtually guarantees that there will be persistent heterogeneity in the solutions generated. Fourth, problems and solutions in knowledge management. Institutionally, how MNEs employ the formal and informal rules of the game has a significant bearing behind the success or failure of knowledge management. A number of informal rules can become problems in knowledge management. In knowledge acquisition, many MNEs prefer to invent everything internally. However, for large firms, R&D actually offers diminishing returns. Consequently, a new model, open innovation, is emerging. Open innovation is the use of purposive inflows and outflows of knowledge to accelerate internal innovation and expand the markets for external use of innovation. It relies collaborative research among various internal units, external firms, and university labs. Firms that skillfully share research outperform those that fail to do so. In knowledge retention, the usual problems of employee turnover are compounded when such employees are key R&D personnel whose departure will lead to knowledge leakage. In knowledge outflow, there is the how does it help me syndrome. Specifically, managers of the source subsidiary may view the outbound sharing of knowledge as a diversion of scarce time and resources. Even when certain subsidiaries are willing to share knowledge, inappropriate transmission channels may still torpedo effect sharing. It is tempting to establish global virtual teams which do not meet face to face to transfer knowledge. Unfortunately, such teams often have to confront tremendous communication and relationship barriers. Video conferences can hardly show body language, and Skype often breaks down. Thus, face to face meetings are often still necessary. As solutions to combat these problems, headquarters can manipulate the formal rules of the game, such as first, typing bonuses to measurable knowledge outflows and inflows, second, using high powered corporate based or unit based incentives as opposed to individual based and single subsidiary based incentives, and third, investing in codifying tactic knowledge such as the codification of the Toyota way. However, these formal policies fundamentally boil down to the very challenging task of how to accurately measure inflows and outflows of tactic knowledge. The nature of tactic knowledge simply resists such formal bureaucratic practices. Debates and extensions. The question of how to manage complex MNEs has led to numerous debates, some of which have been discussed earlier. Here we outline two leading debates not previously discussed: corporate control versus subsidiary initiatives, customer focused dimensions versus integration, responsiveness, and learning. First, corporate control versus subsidiary initiatives. One of the leading debates on how to manage large firms is centralization versus decentralization. Within an MNE, the debate boils down to central control versus subsidiary initiatives. A starting point is that subsidiaries are not necessarily at the receiving end of commands from headquarters. When headquarters promote certain practices, some subsidiaries may be in full compliance, others may pay lip service to them, and still others may simply refuse to adopt them, citing local differences. In addition to reacting to the headquarters demands differently, sub subsidiaries may actively pursue their own subsidiary level strategies and agendas. These activities are known as subsidiary initiatives, defined as the proactive and deliberate pursuit of new opportunities by a subsidiary. However, from a perspective of corporate headquarters, it is hard to distinguish between good faith subsidiary initiative and opportunistic empire building. A lot is at stake when determining which subsidiary initiatives are supported. Subsidiaries whose initiatives fail to receive support may see their roles marginalized and, in the worst case, their facilities closed. Subsidiary managers are often host country nationals who would naturally prefer to strengthen their subsidiaries. However, these tendencies, although very understandable, are not necessarily consistent with the MNE's corporate wide goals. Customer focused dimension versus integration, responsiveness, and learning is the second debate topic. As discussed earlier, juggling the three dimensions of integration, responsiveness, and learning has often made the global matrix structure so complex that it is unworkable. However, instead of simplifying, many MNEs have added new dimensions. Often, new customer focused dimensions of structure are placed on top of an existing structure, resulting in a 4 or 5 dimension matrix. The two primary customer focused dimensions, the first is a global account structure to supply the customers, is a coordinated and consistent way across countries. Most original equipment manufacturers, namely contract manufacturers, that produce goods not carrying their own brands, such as makers of Nike shoes and Microsoft Xbox, use this structure. The second customer focused dimension is often used solution based structure. The typical starting point is to put in place temporary solutions rather than creating new layers or units. However, this ad hoc approach can quickly get out of control, resulting in subsidiary managers additional duties of reporting to three or four informal bosses, acting as global account managers on top of their day jobs. Eventually, new formal structures may be called for, resulting in more bureaucracy. Management savvy. MNEs are the ultimate large, complex, and geographically dispersed business organizations. What determines the success or failure of a multinational strategy, structures, and learning? The answer boils down to the institution based and resource based dimensions. The institution based view calls for thorough understanding and skillful manipulation of the rules of the game, both at the home and at the abroad markets. The resource based view focuses on the development of firm specific capabilities to enhance the odds for success. Three clear implications emerge for savvy managers. First, understanding and mastering the external rules of the game governing MNEs and home country host country environments becomes a must. Some MNEs take advantage of the rules that subsidiaries in different countries must register as an independent legal entities in these countries and claim that other subsidiaries do not have to be responsible for the wrongdoing of one subsidiary in one country. Other MNEs abandon their original countries of origin and move their headquarters to be governed by more market friendly laws and regulations in their new countries of domicile. Second, managers need to understand and be prepared to change the internal rules of the game governing MNE management. Different strategies and structures call for different internal rules. Some facilitate and others constrain. Many actions are affirmed using a home replication strategy should not look to hire a foreign born executive as its CEO. Yet, as operations become more global, an MNE's managerial outlook must be broadened as well. Finally, managers must actively develop learning and innovation capabilities to leverage multinational presence. One winning formula is think global, act local. That's all. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Sean, and I'm gonna be telling you about a story about the LEGO North America Subsidiary Initiative case. The story is about our hero. His name is Peter Ayo, and he had this amazing idea of collaborating with a movie franchise and get a license agreement made with Lego so that Lego could produce toys in the theme of that movie franchise. And just like many corporate rivalries, his compatriots from across the Atlantic, back where Lego is from in Denmark, are not very happy with that, and seen this little UFO image right here. So let's see what happens in the story. Let's begin. So our hero, Mr. Peter Hiayo, when he was much younger than he looks like here, when he was president of the Legos Americas division in 1997, saw it as a great opportunity, observing that North America was a market where successful licensing agreements with other successful franchises was the future of the toy industry. Out of this opportunity, and he was convinced that having a successful licensing agreement with the Star Wars franchise would be the way to go to launch a winning formula for Lego that was so focused on its own toy themes. They did not believe in entering into licensing agreements in any of their products. He was faced with stiff opposition from the senior management team from Denmark, who thought that it was against the very values of Lego and its founder, Ole Kirk Christensen, who believed that war should never seem like child's play, and the very name Star Wars would violate the essence of the Lego identity. Peter Yayo saw the opportunity that the North American toy industry presented and saw that Disney had very well monetized it, and as a result, Disney had licensed their name and their franchises to Mattel and Hasbro, making Mr. Mickey really rich and giving them a 50% share of the North American toy industry market. The United States in itself is the biggest market for toys in the world, which is really, really significant and was an opportunity not worth missing for Lego. Lego's senior management back in Denmark were still in this I'm a lone wolf and I'm proud kind of mentality. But as I would like to say that a lone wolf in the wild can get killed by a bear, and this case could have been a mouse that could kill it, just due to the refusal of adapting to the changing realities of the toy industry. Now, what did Lego North America do when corporate headquarters rejected its initial ideas? Although Mr. Peter Yayo's senior management back in Denmark fantasized about an excitingly bleak future where kids would go around like Chucky shooting and killing people, uh, was a future that they didn't want for their own children and not even for anybody else's. Of course, pun intended. The Star Wars name was associated with violence, and that was something that they didn't want to happen with Lego. And that's why they were against the idea of Lego being associated with that franchise in the first place. But Mr. Peter Yayo did his homework, got relevant information from two of their biggest markets that was the United States, the largest toy market as mentioned, and Germany, which was its biggest market in Europe. And it seemed that parents in the United States were pretty keen on this idea, and parents in Germany, they were okay with it. So both of them were positives, and he presented that in data, this information to the current CEO, who's also the grandson of the founder, and his name is Cal Kirk Christensen, was a Star Wars fan himself, and he was really stoked about this idea, and it was finally agreed that um, that Star Wars and Lego could say their vows and get married under a license agreement to produce toys under the Star Wars franchise name. Now, why do most multinational headquarters not pay sufficient attention to ideas from subsidiaries? So, quite often, this parent company and subsidiary relationship is like a parent and child relationship. If the parent pays good amounts of attention to the child develops well, grows to love him, and yep, everybody's happy as a result, shareholders, customers alike. And in case if the relationship is like where a child is constantly being ignored for many things, their ideas, and so on as well, uh, the relationship gets, yeah, doesn't do well. And as a result, the child's development is affected. And that's just the same with a subsidiary or with its headquarters, where what happens is just like parents are quite often busy with a lot of important things. The same way, MNC headquarters are more occupied with existing commitments of the home markets and other bigger markets or important markets at times. And This results in reduced focus on subsidiaries that might be needing the attention and resources from headquarters, but yet not getting it, and therefore the ideas are also not considered that well. The lack of identification of the full potential of a market of a subsidiary is also a reason why their ideas and their inputs are quite often not taken that seriously. A market may be large, but what's important for a business to identify besides maintaining its market share in a much larger market would be trying to maximize the potential of the new and emerging markets. Because today, as we see, it is emerging markets that tend to be faster growing than larger markets that are mature and stable. Headquarters have more complex functions. Quite often, how what happens is subsidiaries generally, where there's no factory or no production happening, tend to be um, mainly marketing focused, whereas the multinational headquarters would have finance, management, legal, and other departments that they are highly specialized in and focused on to manage the grander scheme of things. And while being more focused on the grander scheme of things is important, maximizing shareholder value, maximizing profits overall, but quite often subsidiaries lose out on that attention because they're seen as just one player in the grander scheme of things, and therefore their ideas are again not taken seriously, although for their own very survival as an independent entity, only owned by the parent company, would need them to be paid attention to, and to be given the independence, the freedom to act according to the local conditions that prevail in their regions. And last but not the least, just like every other idea that meets resistance, multinational headquarters may not sufficiently consider ideas from their subsidiaries, is because they have a way of doing things, and that is how they like it, and that is what they want it to remain like. Whereas local conditions in different markets of subsidiaries may demand different courses of action, and therefore it's really important to consider their ideas, but their ideas are met with resistance by headquarters because if success is observed, which is a positive, by the way, in the market of that subsidiary, it is something that can be implemented in HQ and other markets as well. But because of not wanting to rock the boat at home and anywhere, ideas from subsidiaries can be met with tip of resistance. And what are the lessons we can draw from the successful pushing of one subsidiary initiative in this case? What are the do's and don'ts? So, as in the case of Lego, as Mr. Peter Yayo observed, he was watchful of competition, looking at how the market was developing, what was Disney doing, what was Hasbro and what was Mattel doing. So they looked at that and monetized on that opportunity, uh, and saw that it was right to collaborate with other players who were successful, like in this case, the original owner of the Star Wars franchise, that was Lucasfilms. And then, when he was faced with opposition, he convinced the boss with facts, looking at current information, gathering data through customer surveys in two of the biggest markets, that was the United States and Germany. In Germany, as we saw, and he presented that data before the big boss, that was the CEO of Lego Group, and got his results. And it's really important to know that culture in individual markets does matter. Um, it is not necessary for values in a home market to be the same in another market, especially in this case, a market such as the United States, which is much larger than Denmark and Europe, being the single biggest toy market in the world. This was definitely something that yeah, was not worth missing out on just for the reason of difference in culture. And that is what we're seeing today as well with emerging markets like China and India and elsewhere. Their culture, I mean, and values that are observed by people there, they're very different from those of people in the West. And therefore, one's approach has to be altered when launching into newer markets. And when subsidiaries begin to operate, it's really important to allow them to freedom to operate based on the conditions that prevail in those markets. Now, what are the don'ts? Do not hesitate to use ideas even if they're not original. Like in this case, Sir Peter Yayo saw that Disney was finding a good success with the idea of licensing their name and movie franchises to toy manufacturers, which was a really successful initiative by them. And he saw that Lego too could ride on this wave of license agreements based toys, and collaboration was necessary to do that. And do not ignore a subsidiary, especially if they're significant. Now, in this case, uh, Lego America was pretty significant just because they had the biggest toy market under their feet. And it was really important that conservatism unnecessarily would not dim the future prospects of such a major toy manufacturer that was Lego. And do not be stiff necked. That is, values are important, but also one needs to understand that culture is different in different markets, and therefore values are different as well. And one ought to accordingly alter their approach to those markets.
Hello friends, my name is Aman Shah and I am going to discuss an example of famous Canadian food and beverage company that is Tim Hortons, which is trying to grow their business in Chinese market. As you all might be knowing, Tim Hortons is very well known in Canada for serving coffee, donuts and other fast food items. In fact, it is Canada's largest quick service food chain with more than 4,800 restaurants worldwide. Now, to expand themselves in China, they cannot maintain the same offerings like they have in US or Canada. They should be able to offer something new according to Chinese style of eating. So over here, it uses a unique marketing and sales approach, and it adapts their offerings to local taste. So in China, they introduced some unique items like egg yolk temples, maple lattes, and matcha donuts to adapt themselves according to local taste and new group of customers. Apart from this, they also could have introduced some seafood breakfast or snack items to attract more Asian customers. And if all these new innovations of Asian markets works well, they could also start serving these items in their home or other nations and grow their market. So it's a very good example of a multi-domestic or a localization strategy used by them in order to adapt themselves into new market. A multi-domestic strategy is an international marketing approach that chooses to focus advertising and commercial efforts on the needs of a local market rather than taking a more universal or global approach. This helps in maximizing local responsiveness by giving decentralizing decision-making authority to local business units in each country so that they can create products and services optimized to their local markets.